I just want to start by, I guess, introducing the Dunedin Energy Centre. It's novel in a couple of ways. It's located right in the heart of Dunedin CBD, on the main street, across from the hospital and across from the supermarket. It's the largest district energy scheme in New Zealand. It has 6 major customers. About 95% of the output is supplied to 4 customers, being the University of Otago, the hospital's the primary customer, I should say, in this instance, and Cadbury's, and the commercial laundry Alsco across the road. So there's quite a good mix of institutional industrial loads. Supplies over 120,000 tonnes of steam, it says there. And it is a winter-weighted profile because the university and the hospital primarily use the energy for space heating, and quite considerable thermal heating networks on their sites. I thought it was quite useful to go through a bit of history of what we've done on the site, and it actually coincidentally ties in quite nicely with some of the themes that have come up today. So, well before my time, the boiler house was commissioned in the 1960s by the hospital at the time. In 2002, we purchased the energy centre off SDHB, or was Otago District Health Board at the time. A major part of that deal was the requirement to meet the consent requirements at the time, which was to install a baghouse. I think it was costing roughly $3.5 million needed to be spent on the site, and the hospital didn't have the money to do that. So that was to improve the local air shed, and quite an important one given it was right smack bang in the middle of town. Around about the same time, we also invested a fair bit of money in upgrading the control systems for, I guess, reliability reasons, but also for efficiency improvements. 2008 was when we first trialled co-firing of biomass fuels. Around about this time, I guess the greenhouse gas issue was gathering a bit of momentum, certainly getting a lot of awareness. Our owner at the time, Meridian, this was a very small part of their business, but it was also their biggest chunk of emissions by far. So they were keen to explore other options. And at that time, carbon price pass, I think Tony touched on this, there was anything between $50 and $100 forward price paths being used by reputable sources such as MFE, I think at the time, and then whatever the equivalent of the Ministry of Business and Innovation in the point was. So we completed those trials. In 2010, we were faced with the closure of the Ojai mine. So Ojai used a sub-bituminous coal. I think Desmond, you put up was about 25. CV 25, I think we were using closer to 20 at the time. Anyway, it was a mid-range coal, and it was closed, and the only other comparable option was Kai Point, and that didn't meet our consent because it was sulphur. So we actually got a security of supply issue here. We were forced for a period of time to go all the way to the west coast, get a high-grade coal from there, and as a result, the customer steam prices were increased overnight by about 70%. On the back of that, we instigated a project so that we could utilise lower cost fuels, lignites, and there's 2 options in that category, which is obviously Nuvale and Takatema. And that project, I won't dwell on that too much, but it was effectively we needed to upgrade the feeders, which were old and having capacity issues. So we've got a lower energy density fuel, and much higher ash content, so we spent some money on the ash collection systems. Out the back of that, we decided to revalidate those trials, which I'll go into in the next slide. And as a result of that, we converted the one boiler at the Dunedin Energy Centre to be able to be dual fueled. So not co-fired, but dual fueled. We can switch between wood or coal by changing the feeders. I guess a common theme throughout this is the strategic drivers for us doing so. We own and operate a lot of thermal plant, so we're building a bit of institutional knowledge around the use of wood fuel, the ability to co-fire, and as part of that we wanted to have a marketable reference site for this type of activity. It's definitely a customer value proposition. SDHB as the primary customer, they saw some value in this in terms of our ability to innovate, and actually that was a key catalyst to us being able to get an extension in 2012 to the term of our ownership, which is now to 2027. Back in this timeline around 2010, we purchased a wood fuel business. It was Insular Bioenergy, now Water Energy New Zealand. And we saw the opportunity to create additional supply chain scale in the Dunedin market through obviously a major user of wood fuel. And all of this, I guess, is a look towards future-proofing. We've got ageing plant. We do believe there's some supply chain risk with coal, and as the ETS, hopefully get some legs over time, we've got options, and as part of that is an ongoing customer value proposition. Just a real quick rundown of the existing plant. We'll call it existing, what it was at the time, just to provide a bit of context to what we've done. Again, it feeds into some of these issues, or topics have been covered off by Desmond. But our boilers, they range from about 58 years old to the youngest one of them is 1980. So I think the key bit there is there's 4 of them as well, so this actually feeds into our ability to trial a few things moving forward. Essentially, it's a very the system itself it's got a coal and load system which has capacity, a hopper at the front under a grizzly which has capacity for just a truckload. So that's immediately transferred via a vibrating belt into a bucket elevator up to the top to a screw conveyor which drops fuel in above the over boiler storage. That's where the majority of the storage is, and there's a lot of it. I think it's 70 cubes times 2 per boiler, and that's I guess another key redeeming feature in our ability to work with biofuel in this instance. Baghouse and standard fly ash and grade ash emission systems. In terms of the trials, we started in 2008. That was an ECA-funded exercise. It was quite a rigorously conducted exercise. We trialled all range of fuels: dry, seasoned and green wood chips, sawdust, and green sawdust and pellets. And all of that was blended with coal. So we weren't trialling biomass by itself. We were co-firing. Interestingly, the only fuel that actually failed in this 50-odd-year-old coal-fired plant was the green sawdust in high proportions, which it effectively smothered the grates. Even green wood chip worked to a certain extent, just we got a reasonably poor combustion outcome out of it. Conversely, dry and seasoned fuels were successful. Pellets were fantastic, which you would expect. There's no issues with pellets in coal-fired plant typically, but wood chip was fine as well. In terms of an ongoing process, the biggest issue was we were having to, as part of the trial, we were blending these fuels off-site at the local contractors' transport station. They were weighing that with their equipment and blending it in a precise amount. We didn't have any plant that's actually capable of blending this, so that to do so in the future would be a major investment or a change to what we've got access to. Storage was an issue as far as we did see some effects of segregation in the fuel over time, in the coal-fired fuel, which created a bit of variability in the output. And feeder capacity was, with the fuels at work, was definitely the major issue in terms of getting full output out of those boilers. As I mentioned earlier, we upgraded between that trial and then the next one. We upgraded the fuel, the feeders themselves, and as a result, we were keen to revalidate those trials. But at the same time, we decided that we'd go one step further and actually try running a boiler on just wood chip fuel. This was it was a phenomenal success, really. Our major concerns with running just on wood chip were the fuel storage systems in terms of bridging. We didn't see any issues with that. We've got 45-degree hoppers above the boiler, 45-degree unload system. Unload system might have benefited from the vibrator, but the big hoppers were just 45-degree angle hoppers with concrete line. And yeah, haven't bridged to date as far as I'm aware once. There was a little bit of an issue with hang-up, but it was only minor and didn't really impact on the actual running of the boilers, and could be sorted out with operators if they wanted to. There was definitely reduced ash, and that was a major benefit. These were manually dumped grates, major operator hassle. I enjoy it. It's quite laborious, and you could leave the ash on the grate for days instead of having to do that every couple of hours. And the obvious reduction in emissions, particulates, SO2, nitrous oxide. As part of that process, we only made a few tweaks to the existing plant. We were getting jams in the feeders. They were very close tolerant spreader soaker feeders, which we mentioned earlier. What we did is we actually got the guys out the back to trim them back by about an inch. They had a bit of variability in the way that we were getting distribution on the grate, but again, no noticeable impact on performance. We had access to VSDs on, or variable speed drives on the feeders, so we were able to manage the feed rates and the flingers so that we could get a good distribution on the grate during the boilers, and obviously had good access to both secondary and primary combustion air to manage that. As a result, we actually committed to using wood chip, seasoned wood chip that is, I should say, over the summer periods when we didn't have any peak load issues with the site. While we're doing this, we still observed a few ongoing operability issues more than anything else. Feeder jams I've already mentioned happened less, but one of the things we found was because we were feeding coal and wood chip through the same feed system, we get cross-contamination of feed. Sometimes you get wood chip going past the first boiler and into other boilers, and then you get jams in the other boilers. Again, because we had four, it was more of a nuisance factor than a security of supply issue, particularly during the periods we were running. And capacity remained an issue. These are the volumetric feeders. We could adjust the guillotines to maximum open VSDs as fast as we could, but still couldn't get enough fuel in there. So as a result, we were kind of limited to around half what we were targeting to use. So we were targeting to use about 90,000 gigajoules a year of wood fuel, and we were heading towards 50,000. So we decided to implement a project to install pneumatic feeders, air swept spouts. So effectively, these are feeders where it comes out of the hoppers just like it would otherwise into a much larger dome at a screw, drops out of that, and it enters an airstream which spreads it throughout the boiler. This was primarily, it addressed all those issues that I mentioned above, but we could get full capacity out of the boilers, which was the primary driver. That project cost about 160k. So it's new feeders. We did a few modifications to the chutes, software changes and tuning. So we as part of that, we also installed some deluge systems on the chutes just to ensure that we didn't get any burn back. Not that we actually had an issue with that. We got surprisingly good results. The boiler performance exceeded expectations in a number of ways, and actually anecdotally was better than the use of coal in that boiler, the lignite coals that is. They had to trim back the performance. This is a seasoned fuel. They had to trim the boilers back so they weren't exceeding MCR on a routine basis. It was kind of going like rocket fuel, so to speak. No real reliability issues. It importantly became, with no nuisance factor left and not having to dump the grates, it actually became an operator preference while it was running. And again, we continue to benefit from those reduced emissions. So the ongoing issues so this system's been in place since I think early 2013, and part of what I should have said is part of what we did is we made these feeders interchangeable within about a 6 hour window. So if we want to change between seasons or whatever the reason is, we can switch them out, put the old coal feeders in, and be up and running within about 6 hours. And we just flick over some settings on the control system and away you go. So the main issues we've got, right now in terms of the amount of fuel that we can burn. There's no limitations in terms of capacity with the boiler. Is that the fuel handling system is because the volumes of wood fuel required are so large, is limited during peak season. You're also trying to get coal in there at the maximum rates. So again, we can't run during winter for those reasons. But primarily, because we could burn significantly more wood during the summer period, the primary thing is cost. It's still fuel. Wood fuel at Dunedin is about 20% more expensive for us, and we have been, as part of our strategy, we've been burning a proportion at cost to ourselves as part of this exercise and as a value proposition to the customers. What we are seeing is that this, again, getting more traction in the customer market as well. Some of the University of Otago is considering getting a greater portion of their steam from wood fuel. I know Cadbury's are thinking about that, so it's becoming an increasing part of everyone's awareness. And again, as has been mentioned, if the ETS charges increase as they are meant to, you'll start to see those prices converge as well. Just a couple of key messages. I'm revisiting what I've already talked about, but the key thing is that it can be done successfully, and I would say from our experience, noting the setup that we do have, it was remarkably successful and not particularly costly. We've now got a 7 megawatt boiler that's capable of running full time on season wood chip. It's a 50-year-old boiler. The trials are important. They build operational knowledge, but probably most important, they build confidence. While I've stated we haven't had any major issues running that whole process over the last 6 years, again, we certainly would have jumped straight to wood fuel without having trialled that rigorously. Fuel type and quality is important. We still need a reasonable quality wood chip, seasoned wood chip. We've actually found we can tolerate a little bit of variance in the moisture between 30 and 40%, so it's not strictly a 30% fuel, but chip quality is particularly important. We can't accommodate any oversize or fines. Significantly out of specification. Been over the boiler system. Wood fuel volumes, it's probably the single biggest issue in this space. Everyone's aware of it, but it remains the one thing we can't just solve without out investing a significant amount of money on the site. The existing fuel handling systems designed for coal and solid fuel in general are volumetric, and we need much greater volumes of fuel. So to do this throughout the year or in more boilers, we'd need to look at duplicating some of those feed systems. Performance, I'm going to say performance can exceed expectations. It can actually even exceed performance on coal. Again, noted that we're running against low quality lignites in this instance, but we've had phenomenal results. And we're certainly seeing that the ability to use wood fuels and demonstrate dual fueling is enhancing our customer value proposition.